Alright guys, so in this section, let's look at different types of testings available and when they are needed. At what particular scenario you have to perform these testings. Okay, so we will see each and every testing type in this section with real-time usage. First, let's start with regression testing. Alright, so regression testing is process of testing changes to the applications just to make sure that existing application still works with the new changes what we made. Okay, so now let me explain it by taking my own website qaclickacademy.com. Let's say we are going to, site is already present and I am adding new functionality called register so that people can go and register into my application. So let's assume that I am building this particular functionality. So you know that if you work in agile environment, let's assume that you have taken one complete sprint to deliver this register page. So all the developers and testers have come together for one sprint to build this page with the form details and all the validations in the edit boxes. And finally, once you click on sign up, and this will get stored into the database. All right. So that's what we built in our existing sprint. Let's assume that. So when you have done this sign up functionality, let's assume that you are going to release probably in next couple of days. So today is Monday and you are going to release the product on Wednesday by adding this new functionality called sign up. Okay. So what do you do before the release? You have tested this page thoroughly to make sure it is working as per the business requirement. Everything is okay. But did you test application completely before releasing? Some people may argue saying that why do I need to test again complete application if I add new functionality here? I can go and verify only this page. That's what people say. But here, who knows? Whenever developers are working to create a new page, they may have changes. They may have made any changes into the code such that existing functionality may break. Okay, so for example, if they want to add register link, they have to add it in the home page JS file. So when they are adding, maybe they have break something which can navigate courses tab to the courses page. Who knows that? So it is recommended to test the application completely again before you going to the release. Okay, no matter you have touched very minute part, it is still recommended to test thoroughly application because you are adding the new functionality and making sure that's not breaking any existing application. That kind of testing we call it as a regression testing. So if you read this definition again, it's the process of testing changes to your application. In our case, it's a register functionality. And we are also making sure that existing applications still work with the new change of that sign up. Okay, so this kind of testing of whole application, existing application after you add change, we call it as a regression. But what is the strategy we need to apply to do this regression testing? When I say that we are going to release this product on Wednesday, on Monday, this development is complete. So within a day, how can we test the whole application again? It takes some time, right? There could be n number of scenarios to test, but with the time constraint what we have on one single day, that is Tuesday, when you have a code on Monday and releases on Wednesday, how do you make sure that you test whole application on one single day? So here is where automation testing comes into picture. Okay, so you have to automate every test case, whatever you test it manually, right? So that's where people will put a condition or a definition of done for a user story to complete. Okay, every story, every test case need to be automated. Let's say there are around 100 manual test cases, 100 test cases which you need to test to say that application is working perfectly. If you write 100 automation test cases for all those manual test cases, okay, so for automation test case, manual effort is not required, right? And they will run very fast. They hardly take 1 hour to run all the test cases, isn't it? If you have a thorough automation testing suite, okay, we use that for regression testing. So when you make changes on Monday and when you are going to release on Wednesday, your management will ask you to trigger all the automation test cases as part of your regression testing. Okay, it's difficult to do manual testing on one single day before release of testing whole application, but automation testing will do it for you. Okay, if you kick it somewhere in the night, by the time you come to the office on Tuesday morning, you will see the results of how many pass and how many fail. Okay, so that's the beauty you have with automation testing. And that's why generally when we say regression testing, people rely on automation scripts. So, and whenever people are building automation test cases, they will make sure that that's the right candidate to automate, and if that really serves the purpose of regression testing. Okay, so not only for this release, if you going to release for every sprint, so that means if sprint duration is around 3 weeks, so for every 3 weeks, no one will go and test again whole application. They will simply kick off all the automation test cases and see how they are behaving. And this regression testing is recommended before every release. Okay, but there are a few projects out there in markets where still they are not completely matured for automation testing and they're still relying on manual testing. Yes, there are 50% of projects in industry are still relying on manual testing for their regression, right? So people are implementing their best practices, but still somehow I don't see with the people who I met, and most of them say that they are still relying on manual, but that should be avoided to be more agile. Okay, so when you say test whole application, how do you test it? Okay, how smartly you will make sure that existing application still working with the new changes. You can blindly test everything. Okay, that's one thing, but you should be some smart to select a critical functionalities. Okay, so let me come back to this side. So here my critical functionality here is to see whether all the courses are loaded and whether a user will be able to buy the course from my website. That's the critical functionality. Okay, and next thing is to check if they were able to go through some interview questions, right? So right now this page is in develop mode, so I have not yet developed. By the time you watch this video, you may see a lot of interview questions here. I'm just giving you overview, like what is critical for me. Okay, so you have to know, as your tester, you should know what are the critical functionalities will business take it into consideration, right? And those need to be part of your regression testing. If it is automated or manual, you have to make sure that if you are not able to automate every test, you should at least make sure that you are automating critical functionalities of your application. And test cases which have frequent defects. So you have to see your history, and for after releasing, you may will definitely have some production bugs. So get all your production bugs from last few months and see in what areas mostly you are getting defects, so that in upcoming releases you make sure that you are thoroughly testing those areas which are more prone to defect. Okay, that's also one of the smartest way for regression. And as I said, 50% of people are still doing manual. Within 1 day time, how they will do? Okay, they can do this by considering these points. Okay, testing the test cases which are critical in functionalities and which are having frequent defects. So in my case, let's assume that the practice web page. Okay, so in this web page, every time I see some failures. Okay, this really happens to me. I used to bug my developer to fix these issues. So for upcoming release, whenever they push, I will first come into this practice page and I'll see if everything is fixed. Okay, so get your production bugs, whatever you have in the previous releases, and then figure out what need to be tested as part of regression. And then you can also consider this integration test cases. So more about integration test cases I'll speak in my upcoming lecture. All right, so for now just consider that you have to consider integration as well. So these can be taken into consideration if you have very less time to do regression testing, but it is highly recommended to make sure you have an automation suite so that you manually does not do anything. Because being an agile, we go for release for every 2 or 3 weeks. So it is difficult to test application for every 2 weeks. Okay, you are spending a lot of your efforts and cost wise too. Earlier, when there is a waterfall model, you will have release for 6 months, once in 6 months. At that time, okay, that's fine to have some thorough manual testing once in a 6 months. But keeping an agile in nature, when you are in agile teams, within 2 or 3 weeks, if you want to go for release every time, you have to have this. Right, so that's the importance of regression testing. So in our next lecture, let's talk about smoke tests. Okay, thank you.